Hello, my creative friends, and welcome to another episode of the Daily Prompt. This is Technique Tuesday. So, for the second attempt at a Technique Tuesday, as we introduce our themed days of the week. And so what I want to talk about today is a sort of technique for approaching the writing process. One of the big mistakes that writers do, particularly newer writers, particularly people that don't have a process in place yet, is when they have an idea for a story, they immediately just start writing that idea down on the page. And when they read back that idea, they immediately start trying to find ways to improve it. If you've ever had an idea, you sit down, you start writing, you start banging something out, and you get halfway down the page or 2 pages down, and then you stop. And you go back and you start rereading your work and you start tinkering with those words and finding a more effective way to say whatever sentence it is, or a different sort of thing to inject into your story as you go along. One of the problems is that you're not actually separating out the phases of the writing process. The reason Fast Screenplay is called Fast Screenplay is because FAST, F-A-S-T, is an acronym that represents the 4 parts of the writing process. There's focus, there's apply, there's strengthen, and there's tweak, which basically works out to be sort of planning, story development, writing, blasting it onto the page, rewriting, reshaping it until it's solid, and then polishing so that it's refined and gives the reader an extraordinary experience. That 4-part process, I didn't invent that 4-part process, but I put an acronym onto it so that you'll always remember the acronym. You'll always remember the 4 parts of the process. You'll always remember what the ultimate objective is. And it's not to write fast. The ultimate objective is to make something that reads fast. That when someone picks up your script or whatever it is that you've written, they engage with it quickly, easily, fluidly, compellingly. It's a page turner. It's something that draws them in and makes them want to keep reading and keep finding out what happens next. Well, when you sit down and you put those words on the page and then you immediately go back and you start rewriting, you immediately start changing the words and finding better ways to say something. What you're basically doing is you're starting with that blasting it onto the page process. You haven't started with the planning. You haven't started with the story development stuff. You've just gone straight into the apply phase, the writing phase. And then as you read it back, you're tinkering with it, you're rewriting, you're reshaping it, you're adjusting it, maybe even trying to polish it before you even gotten the idea onto the page in the first place. That's always going to slow you down from a writing standpoint, and it's also going to keep you from moving forward. And here's why, and this is kind of more what this Technique Tuesday episode is about. And that is that when you write, when you try to capture that idea onto the page as quickly as possible, and then you go back and you reread it, what's happening is you're not giving your brain enough time to go where it's going to go. If you start refining and adjusting and editing and changing and reshaping as you go along, what's going to happen is you're preventing your brain from going to that next level because you're going back, you're judging, you're critiquing, you're adjusting, you're modifying before you even really have something in place to actually judge and assess and modify. So my tip to you today, my Technique Tuesday idea, is effectively when you go through this process of writing something onto the page, make sure you actually focus it first. Make sure you then apply that to the page. Get the whole thing out before you reread. Before you go back through to refine and polish and edit, make sure you get it all out of you first. See where your imagination is going to go with it first before you go back and try to refine and polish it. In part because if you let your judgment side of your brain get a hold of what you're writing before it's even had a chance to come out of your imagination, what you're going to do is be ever hypercritical, ever continuously judgmental about what it is that you're writing. One of the great challenges we face as writers is that we're always second guessing our ideas. It's natural. Of course, we're always going to second guess our ideas, but the reason we second guess our ideas is so that we don't put garbage out there into the world. The reality, however, is that we're not putting anything out into the world when we're writing. When we're writing, we're simply capturing ideas, thoughts onto the page. So before we put it out into the world, we're going to refine it. We're going to polish it. We're going to make sure that it is the best it can be. And so when you actually go through the reading of what you've written, and this is kind of what I wanted to focus on today, when you read back something that you have written, there are basically two ways to go about reading it. One is in overview, and the other is in detail. So when you think about reading back whatever it is that you've written, you don't want to think in terms of the detail every time you read through it. One of the most important things to do is to see your work in overview, to see the general overall effect of your work. I have at this point read probably nearly 7,000 screenplays. And one of the things that you realize from reading that many screenplays is that there is an overall flow to screenwriting. There's an overall style about it. There's a feeling, and it sounds abstract and it sounds arbitrary and maybe a little, foo-foo. But the reality is there is a feel to a professional, well-written screenplay. If you're focused on the detail, if you're focused on manipulating the words on the page, on the wordsmithing part of it, always, at the expense of the overall feeling of it, you're never going to quite tap into it. It's always going to feel a little bit mechanical. It's always going to feel a little off somehow. And it'll be hard to define. It'll be hard for people to specifically pinpoint it. But if someone reads lots and lots of screenplays, as all the readers of a production company do, they read hundreds, even thousands of projects. So they understand intuitively, whether they can express it or not, they understand intuitively that feel of what a screenplay should feel like. So what you need to do when you read back your work is think about the overall feeling of your work, in addition to the specific words on the page. It's only by understanding those two different sort of layers to the read that you're then going to be able to go back and start designing that into the story itself. So, a couple of things we covered today. First of all is that process. If you have that idea in your head and you want to just spit it out on the page as fast as you can, you're absolutely, of course, it's your writing. Do what you like to do. I'm going to say that it's far more effective to plan that beforehand, blast that out as quickly as you can, then go back and strengthen it, and then go through and refine and polish it. Don't try to do that all at once. You're going to slow yourself down. You're going to jumble yourself up. But when you do go back and you look at what you've written, see the two different reads of it. The one is the overall feeling of the thing, the vibe that it's putting across. And then the second is sort of the detail level wordsmithing of it. Writers almost always focus on the wordsmithing of it and lose sight of the overall feel of the read. And it's the feel of the read that's going to truly grab the reader of your material. So, there's something to think about, to ponder, to filter through your own unique perspective. Spend some time today taking action, whether it's 10 minutes, whether it's an hour, whether it's 10 hours if you can afford it. Make sure to click to subscribe. Make sure you click that bell to get notified. Like us on Instagram. Reach out to me on direct message if you're interested. And we will see you tomorrow. Thanks for watching.